Hello, welcome back to Therapeutic Madness. My name is Mindy Vincent, and I would like you to welcome our co-host, Justin Areola. I don't know, is it like everybody going to be on the screen at this time?
Yep.
So as you can probably tell, we are doing this all virtually, which confuses me because I'm already technologically challenged, and now on top of it, people are on different screens like the Brady Bunch on a TV above me that I'm trying not to look at. So just bear with me if I look like a weirdo during some of this podcast. But so you can see Justin. Justin, wave to the friends. And then we have a very special guest today, Taryn Hiatt. Taryn, hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. Surviving the virtual world.
I know, it's so weird. And I'm trying not to look at you. I feel like I'm so rude when I'm not looking at people when I'm talking to them. So anyway, well, thank you, Taryn, for taking the time to be here today and be on the show. This show is about all things therapeutic and all things that affect human beings. And Taryn, why don't you tell our guests what you do?
Oh my goodness. Well, so for my job, where I spend my days now, is I work for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. So I serve as the area director for our Utah and Nevada chapters. And this has been a world I've lived in for the last, 18 years.
So how did you get started doing this advocacy and this work?
Yeah, like most, I didn't decide that I was going to be a suicide prevention advocate as a kid. It was a cause that chose me. And we lost our dad to suicide back in October of 2002. So coming up on 18 years. When he died, it was an important time to really start looking at what was happening. I remember vividly conversations that were had amongst our family, is the concern of what do we say, how do we tell people what happened? And we just knew it was important that we be honest, and we start that dialogue about suicide, and that's what took him. And so I sat at my computer all those years ago, and this is back in the day of AOL dial-up, right? So none of this Google stuff.
I heard the dial-up in my head as you said that.
I know. Do you remember that? The chat rooms and creepy things we used to do?
Justin does too.
I
remember this?
I remember getting all the AOL discs in the mail and then trying to
how to make it work.
That's so funny. I forgot about the disc. Shit.
Yeah. So it was an AOL dial-up search where I just started looking for resources, and I came across AFSP. So I found the organization and started the process to bring a chapter to our state, and served as a volunteer for a lot of years. And then they finally got sick enough of me. They said, hey, maybe we should just hire this lady and let her work for us. But
she's everywhere we turn.
Yeah, she's not going anywhere. So we may as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How long was that after your dad passed that you started doing advocacy for suicide?
It was really within that first year, as far as just starting to talk about it, right, and getting conversations happening. I was blessed at the time. I worked for a company. I used to work for Paul Mitchell, the school. I was a teacher and a hairdresser, and I would ask my boss. I said, "Hey, can I do classes, and teach students and talk about this? Like, we need to know what to look for and how to help people, and can we raise money and do fundraisers for this organization I found?" And he said, "Sure." And so I really started right out of the gate. But it wasn't until 2007 was the first time we held an Out of the Darkness walk here in the state of Utah. And from then it just cascaded. I mean, we became an official chapter. We've been doing the walks ever since. And that's when the momentum really started to build. But right out of the gate, I just started doing stuff because it helped me to understand what took him and how to help keep myself safe, because I found myself back in some really dark places in those first couple of years after he died.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't know. So for people who don't know, the Out of the Darkness walk is a walk that takes place every year in September. That's a walk for suicide prevention and awareness, right, Taryn?
Yeah.
The first time, it's interesting, it was in 2007 because that's the first one I ever went to, because I got sober in 2007. And
did you?
Yeah, and when I was 7.5 months sober, Or actually, maybe it must have been the one in 2008 that I went to then, because
Yeah, you probably
Toby
came to our
took
one.
his life in November. So my best friend, when I was 7 months sober, took his life. And so it had to have been the Out of the Darkness walk the next year. But that's the first time I ever heard of the AFSP. And I remember seeing you speak there. And like, I'm sure don't even know I was there. But that walk, that's why. So the walk to remember that happens every year at the Rally for Recovery that I started for my sister, I modeled that after like going to the Out of the Darkness walk.
Oh, I didn't know that.
For Toby. I know you didn't. You don't even know.
That's awesome.
Life. You don't even know. Like, Toby's the only close person I've ever lost to suicide, you know, and he was my best friend. Like, he held my leg when I delivered my son. He cut the cord for my son. My son didn't know that Toby wasn't his dad until he was like much older. And you know, I didn't grief from suicide is really weird. And you know, I'm sure you know that. Like, it's just different. It's so shocking. And I mean, maybe to some people it's not. To me, it was so shocking. And I also had this feeling always like I could have saved him, you know? Yeah. And I think a lot of people have that. Did you ever have those feelings like about your dad? Like, what was the suicide grief? See, me and Taryn are crying. Where are my tissues? I told Justin, I said, I'm going to cry on this episode because it's about suicide, you know, and that's fucking sad. So what was that like for you? How do you find that suicide grief is different than regular grief? Oh, thank you.
Oh, for sure. No, there's a lot of nuances. I think initially the kind of death that it is so traumatic. So that obviously is one, you know, just the way that they die, unexpected. Sometimes it is expected. Like, we knew our dad was going to, I knew it would happen. We were just waiting for when. We didn't know how to stop it. We didn't know how to help him. And even with all of that, you know, you feel all this guilt because you go, God, you know, why couldn't I ever? I should have been able to do more. And, you know, what I've learned over these last 18 years is suicide is the only cause of death that those of us left behind attribute all this personal accountability. You know, we don't blame ourselves when our loved one dies from cancer and say, oh man, if I wouldn't have, you know, said that thing, maybe the cancer wouldn't have got him, or, oh, if I would have only done this, this, and this. You know, we understand it's a health issue. We understand it's a disease and an illness, but we haven't understood that with suicide. So I think that's what feeds into it, is all those misconceptions and stigmas that have kept people from even talking about it, that contributes to the guilt that we feel. When we understand that it was a health issue, that they were sick, that their brain wasn't well, then it helps us to have more understanding and forgiveness for ourselves, I think. So.
Yeah, it's really hard. So I was in the military, and the military has a pretty high instance of suicide, especially for vets. Yeah. When I graduated from like my last school, right, and you so in my school I got picked up to be a staff instructor, which means I would try and help other students going through the program. Yeah. And I had a student who ended up going home one night after a pretty rough day, walked into the shower and shot himself in the head. But he lived. And the day before he did that, he tried to get me to take some time to talk to him. And I just didn't have the time. Yeah. And I beat myself up so badly that I just, like, if I had just taken 5 minutes, like, thinking about that. And, you know, it was very hard. Like, I spent like a month after I would, you know, I was obviously training and teaching other students. I would go up to the hospital at night. His wife was taking it very hard. His sister was living with him and his wife. And so I think you're right. Like, suicide is the one thing that, you know, everybody around that victim of suicide, just, it really gets to you. It sticks to you. You analyze everything over and over again.
Yeah, we become the detective, right? You look for all those clues and things, and it's that ever-pervasive question of why. We want to understand, and we're trying to understand something that for some of us we'll never understand, because we don't know what each person's carrying and the intricacies of the mind and the spirit. And so it's so interesting. And, you know, I say something all the time when I do classes out in the public, because it's important. My dad, I was his last phone call, and I didn't answer. I looked at it and went, I'm not having this conversation with you again. I don't have it in me today. And, you know, but what would he have said? What would he have said? You know, I don't, could I have done anything really differently in that moment? I don't know. And so rather than sit and beat myself up over it, you know, I just learned, okay, now I do things different, right? I look for people I can still help, and I react differently than I did in that moment. And that's how I've healed my own heart and kind of let go of some of that guilt for myself. Even though, like I say, it's hard, that's difficult. And, you know, we all have those days. That's a human emotion to be like, man, I'm busy, I'm bustling through, right? And we dismiss something, not realizing. So, you know, it's interesting. And
so is that what
we're all trying to deal with our own, you know, mental wellness, and you know, you have kids, you have a family, you have all these things, and you're like, man, I really gotta handle my stuff. And it's really hard to recognize the things where it's like, oh, this is serious, I need to take a second. Maybe.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm very grateful that you're doing this walk.
Like, yeah. And oh my gosh, that walk, like I really don't know how you do it, Taryn, because like when I go to that walk, like every time I think about the walk, I get all teary-eyed, and this fucking tissue has pepper on it, for fuck's sake. It came out of out of something that had pepper in it, so when I just touched my eye, it burned my eye, so I can't use this tissue. Anyway, but that walk is like, it gave me a place where I felt like I had people who understood how painful it was for me to lose Toby, especially in that way. And it felt like something I could do to honor him. But then when I walk up and like I see pictures of like little kids, like 11-year-old kids who've taken their lives, and like things that say, "We miss you, Daddy," with their dad's picture, I'm just like, Jesus, you know, like it is just so emotionally overwhelming. Like, how do you... Like, and so that's another thing too, because like when you work in this field and when you do this kind of work, you know, it is already really hard, and you can't always be there for people always when they want you to be either, because you have to take time to take care of yourself. And I've had people call me, 2 of them, and I did not answer the call, and they took their lives, you know, and I didn't know they were suicidal, obviously, you know, but like, so anyway, so what's your response to like all of those questions in the weird ways that I asked them?
No, you know, I think to start out, it really starts with us again understanding that suicide is a health issue. If we can start there, then again, it provides us opportunities to talk more openly. It provides us a willingness to seek help if we're struggling, to connect others to help if they are, to not be afraid of it. I think the advice I try to give people too, and I've given to myself, is I can't save another person. That's not my job. It's not my role. I can't, but I can be a part of helping them save themselves, right? I can be there. I can support. I can encourage. So I think sometimes
not all the time either, though.
Not all the time. It's just understanding that boundary of what can I do and where do I have to, you know, kind of let go. And, you know, like for me too, with the walks, you know, the whole reason we started it was exactly that. We needed to feel connected. We needed to know there were other people like us, because back, 2002, people didn't talk about it. You know, we're talking about it today way more than we ever have, but we still have so far to go. But we just didn't even know, like, who else has this happened to? And so what I love about the walks is the bead ceremony, right? Because we all wear these Mardi Gras colored beads, and they're to represent the people that we've lost, you know, like our connection to the cause. Of course, I have some right here.
Yes.
I roll. Look at me go. But you don't have to show your boobs for these. But so when you're around, you know, at the walk, you know, you'll see people wearing a specific color, and you'll know what that means. Like teal, for example, is people who support somebody that's attempted. You know, purple is if I've lost a friend or family. Green is if I struggle myself. And so with just a glance, you'll know, hey, you know, this is why you're here, and you connect to people in a way without having to say a word. So that's what I love about the walk, is it just brings that sense of connection.
The date for the walk, just so we can let people know about it?
Yeah, and I'm totally rocking my shirt today because we're doing our one in Las Vegas Saturday, but virtually. We're going to have to do it through like Zoom and have people walk around their neighborhoods. It's unreal because everything's, you know, canceled, but hope will not be canceled. That's what I'm telling people.
Yes!
We're not canceling hope, okay? But our walk in Salt Lake will be September 12th. So September 12th, and it's going to be at West Jordan Veterans Memorial Park this year. We've moved. from Liberty Park because we outgrew Liberty Park. In fact, I could show you something really super cool real fast. This is why it's not happening at Liberty Park.
Oh my gosh, that is so much more people than the last time I went. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, this is last year's walk as people were coming out through the balloon arch. We had over 8,000 people who walked last year. More people walked for suicide prevention in the state of Utah than any other health issue. So it's pretty awesome.
That is crazy. It's awesome. It's also like, that's, you know, that's sad. That's a lot of people impacted.
Everybody knows somebody. Everybody knows somebody. And that's why we got to get on top of this now.
Well, with that, we're going to take a really quick break and we're going to come right back and we're going to find out what are some of the things that we can do to help push forward suicide prevention in Utah, as well as I want to talk with Taryn about some legislation that I think has finally been signed for.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll be right back.
Okay, so that's 16 minutes. You guys are doing good.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Normally, Taryn, the shows are an hour, but because we're like in this weird electronic format, they're going to be like 30 minutes. So now I have to have you again because you know that these kind of topics, none of them are topics that you can talk about in 30 minutes.
No,
you know?
for sure.
Certainly not suicide, you know?
No, and anytime. Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate you guys. Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining us. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we're very happy to have you.
Thanks for the work that you do. You're a hero of mine. You just didn't know. We run in the same circles, but never really get to hang around. Yeah. And you've inspired me and you've helped me heal through my own stuff. And I can't thank you enough. And you inspired the walk that I got to start for my sister.
I love that.
From an overdose, and I'm just so grateful. All that came from you watching your work.
I love it.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
So, all right. Should we jump back in?
Yep. You guys are ready.
Okay. Hello and welcome back to Therapeutic Madness. Everyone say hello to Justin and Taryn.
Hello.
You guys say hello to them. So we are in this weird little Zoom format. So we're like the Brady Bunch today, and we will be for who knows how long. So just bear with us as we do our show in our new format. So before we went on break, we were talking with Taryn about like ways we can push forward suicide prevention in this state. Taryn, what do you think are some of the best things that we can do to help smash the stigma around suicide, to get people talking about suicide? What can we do to help prevent suicide? And one of the things that I run across a ton as a therapist is like when people tell me that, you know, they've had suicidal ideations and they think that it's not normal. They're like, they think they're the only one who has them. And I'm actually starting to believe that more people have suicidal ideations than do not. I don't have any research. I've not looked to research that anyone. So just calm down. But that's like what I've seen through my own experience in doing therapy. But anyway.
Yeah. No, I mean, so I guess to start, you know, where people can get involved is get educated. You know, get educated. Learn about it. For whatever reason in our society, you know, we wait until something affects us before we learn about it and understand it. I mean, we're experiencing that right now, right? Like when we wait, we reap the, you know, repercussions of that. So go out and learn. We offer classes, not only AFSP, across the state. You could take classes like QPR, Assist, Safe Talk, Mental Health First Aid. These are courses that'll train you on suicide as a health issue. Again, if you think about any other health issue, if I have a loved one with diabetes, I go to the doctor and the doctor educates me about how I can support my loved one with their illness, right? What do I do to help them? What do I need to be aware of? How do I recognize if they're maybe not doing so good? And how do I help then? And it's the same thing with suicide. Learn about mental health, learn the warning signs and symptoms of depression and anxiety so that when we have them, we recognize them and we know what to do with them. You know, that's the biggest indicator right now that we've seen historically is that 90% of people who go on to die had some form of a mental health condition at the time of death, but most often not diagnosed. And most often it's depression. And when our brain is in that space, you know, when you talk about people having, you know, suicidal ideation, the best way I can explain it is this. If you've never been there, you might go, I don't get it. But think back to 9/11. Right? When the planes hit the towers and the towers started to burn, what did we see people at the top of the tower start to do?
Jumping out of the windows.
They jumped. You know, by definition, they took their own life. They died by suicide, yet none of us sat on our couch and said, oh my God, you coward, how selfish of you, how could you do that, you're going to go to hell, and all these things that we've heard people say about suicide. They didn't jump because they wanted to die any more than most people who attempt or die from suicide were engaged in that because they wanted to be dead. It's about not knowing how to live with what's happening. I don't like what's going on. I feel trapped. I feel stuck. I hate this. And my brain's just getting me away from it. Fight or flight. Get me away from this thing that's hurting me. I am desperate to get away. And your thinking is not rational when we're in crisis. We all know that. So I think it's so interesting that we can look at the people on 9/11 and have all this compassion, yet we offer all this judgment to one another. Like, oh, what do you mean? Come on, suck it up. You're fine. It's not a big deal. When somebody's going through something that's tough for them in that moment. They're trying to figure it out, but the brain can't figure it out. Exactly.
Yeah, and it's not like these people haven't tried. So that's another thing is like people who complete suicide, typically many are under the influence of something because it takes oftentimes something for somebody to get them over that, because people don't want to die, right? And they've tried many other things to be able to live with some kind of peace, and it didn't work, and they can't find it, and so that's the part. Like when I lost Toby, I never did go through a phase of being angry, because I feel so sad that in that moment he felt like that was his only option, and so I've never been able to be angry at him. All I want to do is just hug him and tell him I just love him so much,
Yep. And I can relate to that too. The other thing with suicide grief that we have to be mindful of, though, is every person who loved that person is going to have a different experience. And I hated that in the beginning. Because, I had siblings who were mad, and I was like, what do you mean you're mad? Like, look at the life he lived. He fought so damn hard for so damn long. Like, kudos to him for making it as long as he did. And yet, because I didn't have that anger, but I also had similar things that my dad had. I lived with depression. I had a substance use disorder. So I got it. I understood, on some level where he was at. Plus I've attempted, I've been there. I got that. So it's interesting. Our experience will also frame, right, the way that we kind of take in what somebody else's experience is. But I just wish that, again, in our communities, one, get educated, but two, we just need to do a better job at seeing people as human and allowing people to be human and sharing the good, but sharing the shit, sharing when it sucks and when it's hard. Like right now, this is such a prime opportunity for our nation and our state to come together and say, okay, this is not easy. And people are experiencing stuff that's really hard and uncertain. We don't know when it's going to end or how it's going to end. So how do we support each other and be able to talk about, man, this sucks that I'm having to do homeschooling for my kids, or man, I have to share the house with my spouse. We can't leave. Like, I don't get away from you. I mean, there's a lot that's happening, but what a great time for us to start to practice some of these skills of learning. Like, okay, how do I manage? How do I manage my mental health when everything is?
Yeah. That's actually really important, and something that actually Mindy and I have talked about a little bit is, this new routine and being able to figure out how to handle, because I have a boy that I share custody with, we're half and half. And so it's like, how do I handle still trying to work from home, but also keep him busy doing his things? We're both in the house, so the messes are higher. The fact that we're not getting out as much is hard on your mental health. And it was actually comforting for her and I to talk about some of the things that she's dealing with and recognize it's like, okay, she's going through that too. And we all are, right? Yeah. And that's the thing with suicide is like, I've had an experience where I really felt like, man, when I was first coming out of the military, I was really depressed, going through divorce, and kind of had that same type of thought pattern, right? Yeah. And so just being able to talk to somebody who understands, like, there's a way around this other than taking your life. And identifying, communicating. I think you're right. Being able to talk to everybody and share experiences. And I'd also like to link any educational links or any information that you provide. We'll link them on the Facebook page and get those out to people. So
yeah, I'll send you a link to our website, because we're going to do a virtual Talk Saves Lives here coming up on April 21st. I've done 2 now through Zoom and invited folks to join. And, again, we're going to still try to live and share information and get stuff out there. So I'll send those to you to share for sure.
Great.
That's awesome. We would love to share that. And, one thing I was thinking about today, Taryn, is I'm wondering, because it's Justin and I were talking about the impacts that this whole situation has had on people's mental health. I can't help but think about how so many people have, lack skills to manage all sorts of things in life, right? And this kind of stuff causes crises for people who are highly skilled. And so I'm wondering if, like, during this, especially because of the isolation, the lack of connection, all the things that are coming with this, that nobody could have ever been prepared for. This has not ever happened in my lifetime, but I'm seeing as a therapist, the impacts on people's mental health. I'm seeing it as a human being. And I'm really concerned that our suicide rates are actually going to go up because of that. We'll look back over this COVID-19 time and we're going to see a rise in suicides because of just the desperation. And also I think that, like, the earthquakes and things like that scared the shit out of a lot of people. It really, like, there are some people who really think that we're coming toward the end of times or something, and so what do you think about that? Like, what do you think about the impact that this kind of stuff is having on people's mental health? Where is somewhere people can reach out? And I mean, I've already lost a friend last week in recovery to a heroin overdose, so I know what it's doing to the recovery community too, so. And how many of us are in recovery also struggle with mental health, so then people are getting like a double whammy.
Yeah.
Meetings are all online and weird.
I know, it's so interesting, right? I think that's the thing is it's not a foregone conclusion that we'll see a spike, but we could. So we need to do everything we can to mitigate. And again, that means connect, make sure that people are connected to something, someone, know where they can get help. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, anybody could call 1-800-273-TALK. You don't have to be in a suicidal crisis to call and just talk to a crisis counselor. If you have questions, you're worried about somebody, reach out. We have some great tools here in the state of Utah. The Safe UT app, people can download to their phones and chat live with crisis counselors. The text line, the Veteran Suicide Prevention line is an option for folks. You still call that national number, but press 1 and you're directed to the Veterans Crisis line. Peer support, making sure that we're still engaging in some of those things. While yes, it might be doing it in a virtual world right now, we can still connect to people. And so I would just hope that in these coming weeks and months ahead, that's what we focus on is, okay, it's not just about my own survival, it's about everybody around me too. And how do we do this together? We've got to do it together or we're never going to make it. And so I would hope that we focus on those things. But it will be interesting to see, what comes of it. So I just would encourage people, if you're struggling right now, find that person you can tell, find that person you can be honest with, tell them what's really going on, get it out. We all know as soon as we get out that, it helps us feel better. Even if it's not fixed, we at least feel a little bit better. So find those people in your life. And if you don't have them, use the tools like the Lifeline or the text line, and at least just talk to somebody.
Yeah. And I want to reiterate too that, you don't have to get to a place of suicidality before you get help for not even a mental health issue. Like if, I don't even struggle with a mental health diagnosis, but I've been feeling like quite depressed. Like Justin and I actually made a joke today about like not showering for like a couple of days and just being like off. Right. And it's like, it really is having an impact. And, you don't have to wait until, the house is falling down before you reach out and just get some support, because I don't think that there's anybody who isn't struggling in some way. And I know that especially for those of us who, like we work in this field or we do certain things in life, people think we always have it all together and we don't. And we also are people who bear a big burden and make a lot of space for a lot of people. And that puts us at even higher risk to really be burned out and to also not ask for help. So if you're somebody who's like me, somebody who works in this field, like most of us, don't be afraid to reach out for help, and because it's weird for all of us.
Yeah, I'd also add to that too. If you have a child or somebody who's struggling, my son, he's just turned 11 and he's had some struggles with depression and stuff. And initially it was hard to not feel like I'm failing or I'm doing something wrong, right? So parents, if you're listening, like understand that this is just something to, you just got to find some tools and put them around these children to help them deal with the stuff that they're going through. And it's not an indictment or a reflection on you, to be able to talk about it openly and say, yeah, we need to talk to somebody. We need to get some counseling. We need to make a phone call.
Yeah, and that's the best
I
thing
love
you
that
can
you
do as a
said that,
parent, right?
Justin. Yeah, and I love that you said that too, because even especially during these weird times, right? Like I'm finding my daughter is like not wanting to get out of bed, and when I tell her, "Come on, it's time to get up," she's like, "I just want to sleep all day," and she's 10, and like those are like that's like one of the most common signs of depression, right? When somebody doesn't want to get out of bed, and this is having impacts that people are not seeing and people are not talking about. And I think I love that you said that, Justin, because I know that for me, I just kind of assume children are really resilient and like they'll just go with the flow or whatever. But like they're so deeply impacted by everything around them. And I, as a parent, sometimes I can get consumed in like, how am I building this little moment? You know what I mean? So, Taryn, what would you say are the best things that somebody could do? I mean, you have obviously tons and tons of resources, and you shared a bunch of them. Gosh, you're like a walking 211. It's very nice. But what would you say is a great way to support somebody who is suicidal or somebody who's lost somebody to suicide? Because that's a time, I feel like suicide is a time when people don't know what to say. To support somebody else. And I also feel like people don't maybe know what to say if their friend comes to them and says, "Hey, I'm suicidal." Like I can tell you what I have to do by law and what I would recommend other people do, but what that comes from like a therapist standpoint though. So what do you tell people, Taryn? And how do you support people who've lost somebody to suicide? Because I feel like that's kind of hard to do too. I feel like grief is something that's hard to, it's very unique, with every incident. So
I think if I could put it into a nice package, it would be things like this. First, abandon your need to fix. You can't fix it. You don't have to fix it. Just be there. No judgment, no advice giving. Just listen. Express care. Let them know that you're concerned, that you love them, that you'll listen. And listen means that I'm silent. But just being present and being there, I think, are some of the best things, that we can do.
So, Taryn, tell us about some upcoming stuff. Well, now that there's this coronavirus thing, so what kind of things, how could people, if they wanted to get involved with AFSP, how could they get involved? What kind of things do people do with AFSP? I know Toby's sister, Michelle, she, after he took his life, she got involved in AFSP, and she actually, I think, used to sit on their national board of directors, but, it's such a beautiful avenue for people to be able to find healing. If people want to get involved in that way, what would they do?
Yeah, so you can visit our website, afsp.org/Utah. There's a volunteer application you can complete and just look at what we have available. We do different things from educational programs. We do advocacy at a state level and a federal level. We hold state capitol days where we invite people to come up and, share your story with our legislators so they can put good policy into place. We do support for survivors. You can be trained in how to be a peer support person for somebody if you've had the experience of loss. And then we just hold different events throughout the year. Again, educational ones, fundraising events to bring money to the cause to help us better fund research so we can know more about what causes suicide so we can get ahead of this thing. So there's lots of ways to get involved, but visit our website, afsp.org/Utah.
Nice. And there has been some legislation that's come forward in Utah this last legislative session that I know I was excited about some of it, and I think you are too. Would you like to tell us about some of that legislation? There's two in particular I'm thinking of. You tell us about all the ones you love, Taryn.
The one I loved is House Bill 32, and this is the crisis service expansion. And really what it's going to do is we're going to finally have money to be able to put a crisis system in place in our state. Build receiving centers as opposed to having people go to jails and other places to get access for mental health. We'll have money to implement more mobile crisis teams in rural parts of our state so that, again, if I'm struggling, I don't have to go to an ER. I can maybe have somebody come to my house and talk to me. And so this crisis service bill is really huge. It's going to help, Medicaid be able to cover costs for certain things that are just needed. But really, for the first time, we're seeing a huge investment, millions of dollars into a crisis system that has not existed up to this point. And that's what we need. We need to address mental health in a meaningful way in a respectful way. We cannot continue to criminalize people who are struggling and need support.
Yes, you froze for 1 second at the end, but yeah. But I heard what you were saying, and I was picking up on what you were putting down anyway, because I was a crisis worker too. Like, I used to do crisis work, and we have a shit mental health system in Utah, period. But it's really disappointing, especially in Salt Lake County, especially when you look at Utah County and you see how great Wasatch Mental Health functions, the amazing programs they have. And we just don't have good mental health. I tell people all the time that when mental health is somebody's primary issue and they have substance abuse issues too, we funnel them into the substance abuse treatment world, and that's, they have a primary diagnosis of a mental health issue. They need mental health treatment, and so then people are not getting the right kind of treatment. They're not getting the right kind of treatment that they need. Depending on the mental health issue, it might make them a little ostracized in the milieu. So there's a lot of issues in our mental health system, specifically here in Utah, that we need to fix. We don't have enough beds at the state hospital. I could go on all day. Mental health, the lack of mental health stuff in Utah really pisses me off.
The other bill.
So I'm glad we made some progress, Taryn, because we have a long fucking way to go.
There was another bill. House Bill 35 is going to implement funding for more beds at the state hospital. So that's happening.
Hospital, yes.
Yep. So that one's coming too.
I saw that one.
Yep. Stevie Ellison has been a huge champion.
Yes. So tell us about the conversion therapy bill. As a therapist, I feel appalled that we even have to make these kind of bills, because I graduated graduate school from an MSW quite a while ago, and we knew then and were taught then that it was unethical and harmful. And so I was really surprised to see that, one, people were even practicing it at all, and that we needed to make a law to protect our children from it. So can you tell us a little bit about that? And then tell us why it ties into suicide, Taryn.
Yeah. That whole bill last year was so disheartening, because again, when we first introduced that we were going to be part of the 50 bills in 50 states that Trevor Project initiated to really finally ban the practice of conversion therapy, many folks said, oh, it doesn't happen here. And yes, while some of the barbaric forms aren't happening, talk therapy and those kinds of forms,
I just
we're
thought
still
that no
telling
therapist practiced anywhere.
Yeah, that you're wrong and bad and you need to change, those kinds of things still were. So we're grateful that, Governor Herbert saw fit to take it to DOPL, and that DOPL initiated a rule, and it is now considered, again, it's unethical. If you are caught doing any form to attempt to change somebody's sexual orientation, you're in violation of your ethical code of conduct as a mental health professional, and that's good. So we just need to continue that conversation and keep educating our communities and let our LGBTQ community know they are loved and they are perfect just how they are. And why that relates to suicide is, as soon as I start telling you you're wrong, you're bad, you're not good enough, that has an impact on your soul. And people don't die by suicide or attempt suicide because they're gay. It's because of how we as communities have treated them, and we can do better.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I won't bash on any one religion, but we have a major religious component in the state, and when your mother and your father tell you that you're going to hell because you love somebody that those aren't things that you've made a choice, and you have these feelings that you're not choosing, right? These are just the way that you feel. You feel like you don't have a lot to live for, right? If you're still trying to be religious, if you bought into those things, that totally busts people's worldview. Like, my parents don't love me, I'm going to hell anyways.
God doesn't love me. Like, let's put that one out there. God, come on.
Yeah. And so I think, especially in this state, I think it's very important that we rally around the people that are dealing with these bad actors, and we really take some time to point out the people who are still in those old frame mindsets, right? The okay boomer or whatever it is, like, whatever we got to do to help educate those people that this isn't okay, and we can't be doing that, regardless of what your God or your religion tells you that you should be doing.
Yeah, let's just love each other, people.
Right.
Let's just love each other. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also just, maybe a little public service announcement for anybody who might hear this show. And if you're a religious person, sharing your religious beliefs with somebody after they've lost someone to suicide, it's never helpful. Keep them to yourself. I don't think enough people bluntly say that. So I'll go ahead and take the opportunity. Please don't share your religious beliefs about where people are going. No one gives a shit. No one.
Yeah.
So keep it to yourself. So anyway. Well, Taryn, I want to thank you so much for coming and spending time with us today. Thank you for inspiring me and, helping me to do some of the things that I've gotten to help others. And thank you for all that you do in our community. And thank you for impacting so many people's lives and saving lives and standing up for lives other people are disregarding and not standing up for enough. So thank you so much for doing that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Justin, do you have any final parting words?
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody to love your people. Keep them close. Everybody's struggling. We need to stay together.
Amen.
Right. Okay, so we'll see you on the next episode of Therapeutic Madness, and stay mad, my friends, virtually.